This is the new Nintendo Switch 2, but should you get one? Or maybe you should look into the Nintendo Switch OLED. In today's video, I'm not gonna go over every single spec and detail. Rather, just from my real-world usage experience, which one would be a better fit for you? Should you get the new Nintendo Switch 2, or maybe you should get the Nintendo Switch OLED? Or, if you already have one, should you stay with it or get the new device? First thing you're gonna notice, the Nintendo Switch 1 is a smaller device than Nintendo Switch 2. It is a lighter, smaller device. Back in the day, the Nintendo Switch was a big handheld when it came out. I remember first getting the original Nintendo Switch, I felt like it was huge for a handheld device. But with each year, with new devices, it really came from a pocket-sized gaming device to a handheld gaming device, like a proper gaming on a big screen. When we're comparing them side by side, the Nintendo Switch 2 does feel much smaller, much lighter than the new Nintendo Switch 2, which is a plus and a minus depending on how you look at it. If you want a bigger screen, the Nintendo Switch 2 does have a much bigger screen. But while the Nintendo Switch 1 has a smaller screen, it is lighter because of that. It's just much more ease of use for taking it with you is gonna be much better. And it's also lighter, but not only that, it has an OLED display, meaning that it's a really nice color reproduction, better blacks, and overall just the color rendition is much better. And on the new device we have an IPS panel, which also has great colors by all means, but is not going to be as good in terms of like the deep blacks and color contrast. And this one actually has better frame rates than the Nintendo Switch 1. And we're going to talk about that in a second, because frame rates of how good the screen can be and how good the games actually run on these is two different things. But just on paper, the Nintendo Switch 2 has an up to 120Hz display, where the OLED has a up to 60Hz, so up to 60 frames per second. So if you prefer a smaller device, lighter device, and the one that is gonna cost much less than the newer Nintendo Switch 2 and has the benefit of a nice OLED display, the Nintendo Switch OLED does seem to be a great pick. But then we have the games and the backwards compatibility, because all the games that you have for the Nintendo Switch 2, or the games that you're interested in, for most part work on the Nintendo Switch 2. There might be some exceptions, but for most part, the games will run on the Nintendo Switch 2. And best of all, some of the games have either paid or free upgrades for the Nintendo Switch 2, meaning that some of the games will have a much better resolution and frame rate. For example, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom on the Nintendo Switch OLED ran really poorly, to the point where I actually left it off because I just felt like it was not for me. And I was kind of wishing that if they made a new device that would be able to play it, this is where I would continue on. And this is exactly what I've been doing, because now I play the Zelda Tears of the Kingdom on the Nintendo Switch 2. And the reason for that is, on the OLED, it is a 720p display, which is not bad for a handheld. It's still really good, really sharp. Because of the size of the screen, it's not a problem. But the problem is, when you're gaming, it was nowhere close to the 720p. You could really feel that pixelation and the lack of sharpness of the game. And the worst part about it was the frame rate. Frame rate was aiming at 30, but it was not stable, it was aiming at it, meaning that sometimes you would get drops into 20s. And because of that, it really felt really bad, especially when we have newer and newer consoles, newer devices, and then you play games on your big screen TV in a 4K, or something that is upscaling to 4K at 120 frames per second, and that 120 frames per second feels silky smooth, and you come to 20 frames on this, kind of get let down. If you're used to that, or you really love nice high frame rates, or just at least stable higher frame rates, the Nintendo Switch 1 really had problem with running some of the games, especially the newer games, some third-party games. Fortnite, for example, was really struggling on the Nintendo Switch. Same thing with Zelda and other games like Pokemon. But those games that got the upgrades, so the Fortnite has a new update, we have the updates for Pokemon, for Zeldas, they run at a nice frame rate, a nice resolution. For example, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom runs at Full HD 60 frames per second on the Nintendo Switch 2. While it might be a upscaled Full HD, it still looks super sharp and just works flawlessly in 60 frames per second. Really makes it a joy to play. And the same thing happens when you play docked. The Zelda Tears of the Kingdom at 4K 60 frames per second looks incredible. It's like a night and day difference. So the same games can be played on the Nintendo Switch 2, and for future-proofing, games are gonna be made for it. So if you want nicer games, newer games, for example Cyberpunk 2077, it runs amazing for a handheld that is Nintendo Switch 2, where you're not gonna get it on the Nintendo Switch OLED. So if you want to have that nicer performance, and something that is going to be a little bit more future-proof, I would highly recommend getting the Nintendo Switch 2. I feel like the Nintendo Switch OLED is still going to be a great console for many. Maybe those that want to save up a little bit of money, maybe you don't want to splash that much, maybe you want to get it for your younger kids and they really don't care about like Fortnite or maybe other games and they just want to have something that they can play with. This is a great device still, and many of the indie games can run pretty good on it. Same thing with the first party games. For example, Mario Odyssey runs really good on it. Most of the games are going to run the same or even better on the Nintendo Switch OLED. And those that are optimized for it are going to be way better than the Nintendo Switch OLED. Just with that, I would personally go for the Nintendo Switch 2. It is just much more future-proof device, something that you can expect new games coming out with better quality settings, where this will probably get new games too, but they're not going to be as good. And some of the games are just not going to be available on it. This is like the last gen, this is the new gen, this is where the focus is gonna be on. So if you want to have something that just works better, you can still play the OLED games, especially if you didn't play those games, and you can experience them firsthand on the new Nintendo Switch 2, this is the better one to get. I would highly recommend. There's a huge difference playing Pokemon, Scarlet and Violet, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, and the new Donkey Kong Bonanza on the new device is just a night and day difference compared to the old system. So it's a much better future-proof device. One thing, if you're getting any of these devices, is subscription. You're still gonna have to have the Nintendo Switch Online if you want to play online, for example Mario Kart World, or if you're looking for cheaper games, or maybe just get a little bit of a discount here and there, check out Instant Gaming. With Instant Gaming you can find great deals on games for all platforms and on the Nintendo Switch. This is where I actually got my Nintendo Switch Online subscription from. And also I've been able to get many games for my Steam Deck OLED at prices as low as $1 or $2. I was literally able to get the Batman Arkham Trilogy for just a couple of dollars. But also together with Instant Gaming we're doing a giveaway, where one of you can win a game of your choice. If you're interested in this month's giveaway, check out the link down below. In conclusion, the Nintendo Switch OLED is a pretty cool device, but in 2025 I just don't see the appeal of getting one. Unless you want to have something that is cheaper, maybe something for kids that you don't want them to break something more expensive, or maybe just something that works great for indie games that will run great on it. In that case, it is a still cool and good device. But if you're looking for something new, definitely the Nintendo Switch 2 is the better option of the two. And I know it's a newer device, it should be better, but just know that the games that are on this will run even better on this. So if you want to have something future-proof, I would highly advise getting the new Nintendo Switch 2 over the Switch OLED. While it may be tempting to get one because of the price and it might look really similar, I would definitely go for the new one. With that being said, if you have any more questions about the Nintendo Switch OLED or the Nintendo Switch 2, let me know in the comment section down below. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video once again, and I'll see you next time.